So we're effectively, based on people's testimony, mapping the afterlife with AI. And people are going to have very serious problems. Some people are going to have a very serious problem with that, because it could be extremely manipulative. Like who has ever used a spiritual concept to manipulate somebody? Oh, that's never.
Are we one? Are we infinite? Are we temporary?
Our guest tonight is an incredible artist, a director, also a sound healer, a leader of ceremony, and currently someone at the forefront of AI art. I present Anthony Pietromonaco.
Thank you.
Thank you.
An illustrious introduction.
Well, thank you for joining us. I'm very excited. You're a very, very deep person that I know very, very well. We've had some incredible conversations, and I'm very excited to get into it.
Yeah, I appreciate it, man. And likewise, incredible artist. And I think it's infrequent that you can dive as deep as I think we have and then speak intelligently about it. A lot of times it's like this sort of ineffable thing, but we actually have language to put to it. So this is fun.
Yeah, amazing. All right, well, let's get right into it. So you're doing all this AI stuff. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, so, my career started as a filmmaker, and using sort of traditional tools, there was always this one project that I really wanted to do, which was related to past life regression. And I went out and I took it around Los Angeles and tried to pitch it using traditional methods, and it was cost prohibitive. The idea was that we were going to document and interview people who had gone through these either near-death experiences or had been hypnotized into remembering past lives, and then we were going to depict them. But to do that using traditional methods, props, actors, locations, costumes, all of it would cost hundreds of millions of dollars, and especially for like a new project that didn't have major celebrity attachments, even if you were James Cameron or Ridley Scott, it would still be hundreds of millions of dollars. So it was impossible. And then AI comes along, right? And this was this one project I was not willing to give up. And when Midjourney started coming along and you could really start to see how realistic it was, I put together this proof of concept and ultimately ended up getting funded. And so when it came time to go into post-production, the most effective way to get what I wanted was just to learn these tools, which have now become so accessible, and really to me and to anyone, to express their vision. So I locked myself effectively into a room for about 6 months and just again and again and again until I started to get close to what I had in my head. And then since then, I've been doing pretty much AI work full time, but part of that really focused on this intersection between spirituality and artificial intelligence. And in the process, I've really developed a very unique dialogue with AI and come to, respect and understand it in a way that's probably pretty unique, I think.
Absolutely. I mean, I'm amazed that you've done that because, I should say you and I are collaborating on a project, on a video for one of my songs. And, I find it I find it amazing and I'm enjoying the results, but I find the process difficult. I find it like anything but spiritual, sitting behind a machine in a room by myself doing this stuff. But watching what you've done and what you've created is so incredible because you really have found the spirituality in this very mechanical kind of art, which in some way actually does. I mean, the concept of the consciousness of the intelligence is just a philosophical question anyway. And I think that is actually really coming through the work that you're doing. So I love what you're doing and I'm so fascinated by it.
Well, I appreciate that. And, it's a huge point of resistance that I get whenever I present this work to people. I mean, if I'm going out to like a buyer for a streaming service or something like that, I've had it said directly to me. It's like it is impossible for me to accept that AI could represent a spiritual concept. And my response to that is, AI is not representing the spiritual concept. There's a human behind it that's telling this story. This is a human-directed experience. And AI is akin, at least as far as the visual representation of AI, it is akin to animation. It's a different category of animation. It's not keyframed, but even if you're a Disney animator or a Pixar animator, people have been using AI to interpolate between keyframes for a very long time. That's not new. Right.
Yeah.
The only thing that's new is like these image generation tools, and there's controversy around this idea of, where did those images come from? What were they trained on? It was what artists should be compensated for that work. And I think that that's a totally valid thing to discuss. And I do believe that artists should be compensated for their work 100%. And at the same time, I'm just trying to express an idea. And I haven't really been compensated for this work. I've put in an enormous amount of time on it, as any artist does, right? Like you're willing to bleed for your work, and this is just the tool that I'm using, right? But what I think is fascinating about using AI in this context is we've sort of discovered a way to interact with yourself. It's sort of like a new therapeutic modality that didn't exist. It wasn't possible for it to exist before this point. And it's similar to internal family systems or parts work. If you ever read the book No Bad Parts, it's about something called internal family systems. And it's typically, if you're going through this sort of therapeutic practice, a therapist encourages you to look at a piece of yourself that is asking for attention, or it's damaged, or it's scared in some way. And they ask you to have a dialogue with it. Right. So what we've done, though, is we take this position of, okay, we're going to explore a past life. And so you go into a hypnotic state and you go through this experience and you see, or you're presented with, a version of yourself that is not from this moment. And the question becomes, what is that, right? And there's this fully fledged narrative there. And in my experience, it has always been something that is profoundly mirroring someone's present. And so I think there's two possibilities, right? One is that was you. Your soul lived that experience. You were in that place at that time. And the reason that you are the way that you are now is because there's some sort of a scar or an echo. The skills that you have, the trauma that you carry, the reason that you are the way that you are is because your soul lived that experience, and you could potentially historically validate it, right? And the other explanation is that your subconscious is manifesting some sort of a narrative that you can objectively observe and interpret and understand. And until now, that was a purely spoken dialogue experience. And now you can look at it, and you can look at it in a way that feels correct to the person who went through it. And that's just not something you couldn't look at your past, your pre-reincarnated self before. You couldn't look at your subconscious before, not in the way that you can now. And I find it fascinating that we can now do that. It's emerging technology like so many other things, but I find it incredibly powerful. And having gone through the experience myself about a dozen or so times, it's led me to question a lot about what reality is and what spirituality is, and I can go on and on about this stuff, but there's this idea of kind of like a simulation and like, what is the soul? What is God? And one anecdote I'll just say quickly is like, there was a Chinese kid, he was like, I think he's a graduate student, who created 1,000 instances of an AI for the purpose of predicting future outcomes. And in the event that you can create 1,000 simulations of human intellect, and you can create an environment that is imperceptibly different from reality, which, if you're using some of these AI video generation tools now, like even as a career filmmaker, there's sometimes when I'm looking at it, I'm like, is that AI? I don't know. Then at what point, do you not, at what point does it become probable that this is a simulation? And in that case, like, what is the spirit? And what is the purpose of the life? it's a rabbit hole that I love to kind of fall down, and you can call it hot tub conversation, whatever, but it's just eternally fascinating to me.
Yeah, I mean, there's two subject points that I find really fascinating. One is the thing that we were talking about earlier today, which is the idea that you're not actually ever making a choice in this life. You made all the choices as you came into the life, and that you're actually using the life to figure out why you made those choices. And we were talking about it coming out of a scene from The Matrix where Neo goes to see the Oracle, and the Oracle says that to him, says that actually, I didn't tell your future. You had already made the choice, and I knew what choice you'd already made, and you're just figuring out why. That's one question. The other question that keeps coming up is the question of God being this unique soul consciousness in the entire universe, so that you don't actually exist, I don't actually exist on that level. Like in terms of the consciousness, we share that one consciousness, and yet God is too vast to understand itself. Therefore, in order for it to have a perception of itself like a mirror, it needs to divide itself into these fragments of consciousness that are what we are and what all the animals are and what all the plants are and everything is in the entire universe. And in doing so, it has self-discovery. So I find both of those subject matters supremely fascinating. What do you think?
So there's a short story by Andy Weir called The Egg. And I think it kind of addresses both of those questions simultaneously in a way. And the short story of The Egg goes something like this. There's a guy who dies in a car accident, and in between being reincarnated into his next life, he has a conversation with God. And over the course of the conversation, he comes to discover that he's going to be reincarnated, but that when he gets reincarnated, he's going to be reincarnated in the past. And so the guy says, well, wait a minute, if I was reincarnated in the past, then I could have re-encountered myself at some point. He's like, yeah, well, that happens all the time. He's like, well, what do you mean? And he comes to find out that every human lifetime that ever has been or will be experienced will be lived by the same human spirit, re-encountering itself over and over and over again. And once that human spirit has lived the sum total of human life, then it can evolve into whatever the next plane of intelligence, of consciousness is. And so he's like, well, wait a minute. So you're saying that I'm Jesus Christ? And he's like, and you're everyone who followed him. He's like, you're saying that I'm Hitler and you're everyone he killed. You're saying that I'm Abraham Lincoln and you're John Wilkes Booth. That every act of kindness or every act of cruelty that has ever been committed or will be committed was against yourself or towards yourself. And in the context of like my work and working with, documenting people's perceived versions of reincarnation and all of these things, there's this idea that what is the purpose of a life, right? And the purpose of the life seems to be to learn, to experience, and then to contribute to some sort of a collective. People that work with psychedelics and things and that sort of thing, like in my experience working with psychedelics, my most favorite part about it is, yes, I get to help people. I get to help people help themselves. But the part that I enjoy the most is whenever they come out of these experiences and I get front row seats to them describing in their truest, most honest, most raw moment, what they find they think their purpose is. And it's always something super simple. Like, I need to forgive myself. I need to connect with this person, or I need to connect with life in this way. I need to stop working so much. I need to spend more time with my kids. I need to be a father. I need to be a mother, And it's like, in the context of the past life regression work, whenever you watch people go through these things, they're seeing themselves re-encounter these patterns, these cyclical things. And it's, some of my mentors within the past life regression space would say, well, that's the sacred wound. That's the thing that needs to change. That's like the function of the life. And so it's like, for what reason are you here? I think you already know, and I think that's intuition, right? That's how we observe that. And there's a quote that I love, which is, intuition already told you. Everything after that was just a negotiation with fear, right? And I think that is so true. Like, it is never ever wrong. It's wrong whenever there's a negotiation with it. And you put these things in place that are going to interrupt that. And I think that that's like the function of the lifetime. And so like that as it relates to your question about like God dividing itself to forget itself, to experience itself, I think that when you strip away all of the resistance and all of the fear, that you're connecting with this like pure divinity, that's the connection with God, right? That's your intuition. That's it. And like when you're trying to figure out why did I make this choice? It's to forget. It's to remember that you don't need to be operating from a place of fear. And it's so interesting whenever you watch somebody go through these past life regression experiences, because in the context of, I get more than one shot at this, people come away from it with like a pretty strong argument that I'm going to experience this more than once. You stop behaving from a position of scarcity, of fear, and you start behaving from a position of curiosity. And I think that is it. If there isn't it, I think that's it, is to connect like curiosity, intuition, and moving from a place of like, not like, oh, if I don't do it right, then I've lost. Like, no, why am I moving towards that?
Okay, so here's a big question, right? You ever notice like a dentist with bad teeth, for example?
Sure.
Right. So you're someone who has this knowledge and you believe it, right? You believe what we're talking about. And yet you still feel pain in life. How do you reconcile that?
Yeah, well, like you said, there's doctors who are bad patients, and there's pilots who are bad travelers, and there's spiritualists who still repeat the same mistakes. And I have my own trauma that I'm dealing with, and there's a reason. I'm still. It's like sandpaper on a rough edge. I think I'm still kind of like brushing that off, and in my experience, the more that you love and the more fiercely that you feel about something, the harder it is for you to let that thing go. That's where most of my pain comes from. I reconcile that I justify that by saying that I care. But it's like a Buddhist quote. It's like, when at the end of your life, three things that matter are how much you laughed, how fiercely you loved, and how gracefully you let go of the things that were not meant for you.
Yeah, that's amazing.
That one.
Yeah.
That last one. It's okay to want, and that's where my pain comes from for the most part. But I'd rather, I guess I'll just keep trying,
Yeah, I mean, I feel the same, by the way. So I'm not asking you the question as though like, oh, why can't you do it? Because I think none of us can do it. We all struggle. But I just wonder why we struggle when we know. I mean, I very often, I have to say I am getting better at this, but still not perfect. It's still not perfect. But there are moments where I feel so much pain about various issues. And I think to myself, okay, I've been here before and I got out of it and it was fine. And I know that I'm going to be fine again. Mm-hmm. So at the very least, that's one thing that's changed now from like, let's say 30 years ago, where back then I didn't know I was going to be fine. Now I know. But nonetheless, in the moment, the pain is still the pain. It doesn't get lightened by the fact that I know I'm going to be okay.
Yeah. Well, I mean, all you can do is feel it fully, right? If you look away, if you dull it, if you numb it, with whatever thing that is, whether it's, there's all kinds of drugs, right? There's physical ones, there's chemical ones, there's distractions, there's social media, there's all this stuff that, like, the only way to move through grief and pain, and at least insofar as it's not like you got hit by a bus, and even then, is to just be present for as long as it takes. And in that, there's a learning. And I do believe that, like, if the greatest learning comes, I think there's great learning in the highest highs, but the greatest learning is in the lowest lows. And it's a requirement. You cannot you must have the dichotomy in order to have the joy. Otherwise, there would be no contrast, and there's contrast in everything. And art, that's the profound kind of like realization. You have to create the tension and release. You can't have release without tension, and that's the pain, right? So if you're not feeling that and you're complacent, that's, in my opinion, not a life that I want to live. I can't place judgment on the way somebody else would, but
I mean, I agree with you. I'm just curious, what do you think about Buddhists who believe that any kind of attachment is just the cause of suffering and therefore it's better to be detached?
I think they're probably right that attachment is the cause of suffering. And that is a lesson that I have not been able to apply or been willing to apply, to place myself in such a place of neutrality that I had total peace, that I didn't have the swing. I'm sure it would be more peaceful. And I really liked the highs, and as a result, I've experienced some significant losses. Maybe one day I won't want that, but it's not today.
Yeah. Yeah, that's interesting. It's a question. I mean, I a lot of the time I ask myself, what am I supposed to be aspiring to? Am I supposed to be aspiring to peace and calm, or am I supposed to be aspiring to these polarized swings that allow me to feel intensity of emotion?
Well, I'm just interested to hear your perspective on that too. Is like, as an artist, as someone who strives towards expression and, in some way or another to be witnessed in that expression, would it be better for you to just operate to make beautiful music in a vacuum and not have to worry about recognition? There's a dialogue that happens there between an audience and an artist. Like, I don't know the answer. The music would be beautiful either way, but it's like, if no one hears it,
a tree fell in the forest.
Yeah, exactly. What do you think? I mean,
well, on that issue of recognition in particular,
well, I guess of being witnessed.
Well, I mean, there's a lot out there right now on social media about this subject, particularly two very interesting clips I've seen. One is with Noel Gallagher, one is with Rick Rubin, where essentially both of them say the same thing, which is an artist should never create for the audience, and they should just create for themselves. I'm a Gemini, by the way, and I'm a very mega Gemini. I'm Gemini in a lot of my chart, in a lot of areas. And, I don't know if everybody believes in astrology, but I've found actually that this turns out to be very accurate about my personal makeup of who I am. And my extremeness of Gemini basically makes me able to hold multiple seemingly paradoxical ideas at the same time in happiness, like in peace. And it doesn't bother me, like I don't have to make a decision that the audience has to be pandered to or not. And I think that I can actually do both at the same time. I can actually create without thinking about the audience at all and just create what I want to create, and also consider the audience at the same time, even though those two statements seem to be completely negating each other.
Yeah, I love that. David Bowie said, "Don't play to the gallery," right?
Right.
And Rick Rubin's like, if you're playing to the audience, then that's commerce. It's not art. Art is a diary entry. It's an act of devotion.
I mean, I agree with that. Although the one thing that I would say is that as people, right, just take the job element out of it and the commerce out of it. Just as people, every action that we do has a consequence somewhere else in the universe. At the minimum, if it's not to another person, it's to a tree, it's to a leaf, it's to anything you do. You move your hand, you just move molecules in the air. You know what I mean? So I don't think that there's a problem with being aware of what your footprint in the world creates. I just think that what becomes a problem is if the fear of that holds you back from doing the things that you actually want to pursue in your life. And so I feel that on a personal level. I also feel that as an artist. As an artist, I think that if I'm aware of what my music how it might land somewhere, or what the audience wants, or whatever, I don't think having that awareness is a problem. In the way that, you said that it's like if you do this, then it automatically means that it's for commerce. I don't know. I don't know that I agree with that, but I think it's an approach. If you start thinking about, yes, I want to be successful and I'm going to do this so that it becomes successful, then it's exactly what you said. But if you're like, I'm doing this for me, and I'm aware that it's going to possibly land well with these people and not land well with these people, and I've got some idea of the consequence of what I'm doing, but I'm okay with that, I think that's cool.
Yeah, it's interesting. Like, what comes to mind as you're talking about this is like the act of being a DJ and like listening to music. Like, it materially changed. Like, whenever I started to learn how to DJ, it materially changed the way that I listened to music, because I was no longer listening to it simply for my own enjoyment. I started thinking about it kind of like a spell or something like that I was going to cast on somebody. It was going to like have an affect. And then there's a dialogue that happens there. And that's like the magic of DJing, right? Is whenever you start to have this dialogue with like, dozens or hundreds of people, and it's intoxicating. But then, you start thinking about it from the audience's perspective, because is how I can have that dialogue, how I can push and pull and play. And that's different than being a producer in a way, because you're not creating it from nothing, but it's also similar, I think. So I'm not sure, what the answer is there, but it's an observation, and I think it speaks to just the whole topic of a creative act. And I don't have a strong enough opinion one way or the other, but I guess what started this whole conversation was kind of like, why did we make the choice, right? And I think I had a Sunday school teacher. I grew up in a very pretty strong Christian household, and at around 14 years old, I started really questioning everything, much to my parents' delight. And I went to my Sunday school teacher, and he was also my creative writing teacher at my high school, and Mr. Ewing, I'll never forget him. And I was like, well, what about gay people? And like, what if you're born in China? Like, are you going to go to hell? And, what about free will? And he's like, Anthony, you're asking very important questions. And I think it's important that you find your own answers.
Ooh.
And didn't say one way or the other, And I think that just having this conversation, and hopefully if somebody listens to it, that it provokes enough thought. And if you decide to do past life regression or something like that, and you look at yourself and you go through this experience and you ask yourself, am I reincarnated? Is that true? Or is this my subconscious? The point, the reason that I make this choice is not to validate or invalidate the existence of reincarnation or God or the soul in any one particular way. It's to encourage others to ask their own questions and find their own answers. I think that's the point. If you don't even think to ask, and you don't put in the effort or ponder. I came from like a very small town where I don't think very, very many people thought about some of this stuff. And I hope that they do ask. I hope that they do get inspired to ask, because I think there's a lot of evolution and growth and important stuff that comes from there.
Yeah, for sure. I'm very curious. First of all, like just to clarify, in this show that you're working on, you are actually creating representations of someone's regression and showing it to them. And in the show, the audience can also see that. But actually, part of the therapy of the person who's undergoing it is to see a visual representation of what they have, recounted from their hypnosis, correct?
Well, in post-production, I mean, it's not done live.
I see.
I mean, I am, in fact, while they're going through the regressions, creating kind of like some quick reference images. Excuse me. I am creating some quick reference images, but there's a significant dialogue that goes on during the post-production process to make sure that those images that we are creating are authentically representing the way that they saw it. And the reason that the pilot episode is primarily focused on me is because I had greatest access to myself, so that I could prove the process through which we went through. But what's really interesting about that is basically what we do is we take, to get our baseline, we take the audio transcript of the person who's gone through the regression. We take the audio file, we upload it to an AI-based transcription service, which then creates a text record of everything. And then we take that and we then run it through, Claude, and we use Claude. And then we say, write a screenplay.
Wow.
Yeah. And we say, scene by scene, with every piece of dialogue that was spoken, and use every description of every character and every environment as spoken by the person who went through the experience. And so what ends up happening is you get around, for about a 2-hour session, you'll come out of that with around a 30-page screenplay that's just represented by their actual audio. We're not saying make this up, Claude. We're saying use this information and then create a screenplay. And then we'll go through and we'll make sure that it's correct and based on our interpretation of it, which is also subjective, right? Because we didn't go through it. And then from there, we'll create a shot list. And from there, we'll create prompts. And from there, we'll animate them. But we go through this process that's taking a text record, effectively like someone's dream. It's like you wake up in the morning, you roll over to your partner and you're like, let me tell you about this crazy dream I had last night. It's like, no, let me show you this crazy dream I had last night. And that's what we're basically doing with AI now. That's what anybody can do with AI now. And it happens very quickly, and there's a high touch version, there's a low touch version. It's like anything else. It's like you can have like a shitty version that you just give it a prompt and then it'll come up with the whole thing. Or then there's a high touch, like very human driven version, which is what I'm doing, or with my team, where you're like shot by shot, nuanced detail by nuanced detail, making sure that we're telling an emotional story, that's really relevant. And what's really interesting about these past life regressions is that it's like Forrest Gump. You've got these kind of like tentpole emotional peak moments that are strung together that are of the most significance to that particular lifetime, of when they lost a relationship, or when their career was flourishing, or when their daughter died, or when their son was born, or when they died, and then that becomes the spine of the narrative. And it's all reflective of what you're currently dealing with. It's wild, and the wisdom in that. It's like a parable, it's like an Aesop's fable or something.
At this point, obviously technology has advanced incredibly so that you can do something like this. At some point, it's going to get to a point where it's going to be so good that the render time is going to be instantaneous, that the visual quality of what you're looking at truly is going to be indistinguishable from reality. When that happens, what do you think the effect on people is going to be when they are subjected to images that are indistinguishable from this reality, and then their memories get convoluted between actual reality and projected reality that they've seen?
I think it's already happening, and I think what you're going to see is a mass return to analog. I think you're going to see, as AI scales up into this place that is, feels overwhelming, that you're going to see like a movement to not use electronics and to go to places where you're interacting with people in person. Burning Man, places like this, concerts, any in-person real feeling, touching, communal event, I think you're going to see a huge rise in experiential design and this sort of thing. And it's my hope that, as far as the experience of using AI, and I view it personally as like a profound responsibility that we have to create experiences that are positive, because there will undoubtedly be negative ones, and already are. And it's like this, everyone's like, oh, AI is going to take our jobs. It's like, no, someone using AI is going to take your job. So we need to be using it in a way that is to humanity's benefit, not just noise, not just selling, toothpaste or whatever, or not just playing video games where you're just going around murdering everything, like to actually create constructive environments. And I think like this project is one of them, at least as far as I can see. And that will be debated. There are going to be people who have a very serious problem with this. You're talking about, in effect, here's the craziest thing. Okay, I have to say this. When you go through a past life regression, there's a moment when you experience your death, right? And then there's a space in between. And the craziest thing, I get goosebumps even now just thinking about it, is that everybody that I've seen go through this, including myself, regardless of suggestion or philosophical or cultural background, describes something pretty much exactly the same thing. And it's like this central kind of source that's like radiating out these kind of strands of like potential. And so we're effectively, based on people's testimony, mapping the afterlife with AI. And people are going to have very serious problems. Some people are going to have a very serious problem with that, because it could be extremely manipulative. Like who has ever used a spiritual concept to manipulate somebody? Oh, that's never. But it's not. We're not driving the narrative. We're just documenting what somebody said. We don't have.
Yeah. So can you say more about that? What are people seeing from their death?
Well, in post on this interview, I'll send you the images. But it's just they say that they go to a place that is it feels like a return. It feels like they're surrounded by familiar energy. It feels like a relief. The transition, it's like that, and then they effectively can like choose when to come back. In my own experience, whenever I went through this, it was like I was by like my mom, but not just like my mom. It was like this feeling of protection and safety and familiarity, like I was being like held. There's no learning there. There's nothing to be found there. It's like a relief.
And what's the image though? These strands of potential.
It's kind of like a large source of energy in the middle, and then radiating out in these like tendrils. This like infinite number of tendrils is this kind of wavy, energetic pattern. And I've based on my own experience and based on kind of like the description of some of the people that I've seen go through it, we've created a few representations of it, like simple ones. I think from a research standpoint, this is a extremely fascinating place to if you like, let's say just from a perspective of near-death experiences. There are thousands and thousands of documented cases, and there's millions of dollars of research, if you consider people's academic tenures, that has been dedicated to the study of what happens when you die. Every human being on the planet at some point will ask that question. And so whenever somebody crosses over and goes through a near-death experience, they have an answer. And the only way that we've been able to objectively observe that answer to this point is by listening to their testimony, or maybe there's some painters or something out there that have done that. But we could use the same process that we did in the show, where you take their audio testimony of what happened, run it through the same system of, create a screenplay, create a shot list, create characters, locations, and actions, and all this stuff. And you could create, like, just based on recorded research, you could create a visual record of every near-death experience that has ever been documented. Now, Like, who wouldn't want to know what that?
Well, I'm super fascinated. So you're describing this sort of ball of energy in the middle with these tendrils emanating from it.
Like a galaxy, like a star, like a nebula, but
is there color?
There's like, it's like every color and spectrum.
Okay. So it's like,
and if you've gone through a psychedelic experience, a lot of people have touched some version of this too.
Right.
And people that talk about going through like, 5-MeO DMT experiences, even ketamine or psilocybin, there are people that touch something beyond, and they feel this connection to everything, like this, panpsychism, I don't know, where you see consciousness in everything. It's like there's these kind of like tendrils of light in a void without form,
I've got a question, and it's just a question. There's no judgment behind it. It's a debate that I have in my own mind. Well, we've been made with the brain filter that we have not to see that, right? So why should we open those doors of perception to see those things?
It's a totally valid question, and it's one that my mentors have posed to me, and I guess there's this like punk rock, version of me that's like, well, we're going to do it, but it's a totally valid question. Like maybe those things are best left to the beyond, maybe we're in, and one of my favorite quotes is, it's not from a great movie, but it's from the movie Troy, where Brad Pitt's in this temple with this maiden, and he's like, let me tell you a secret that they don't tell you in your temple. The gods envy us. They envy us because we're mortal. Nothing will ever be more beautiful than it is now, because we will never be here again. It's like the sakura blossom. It's scarcity. It's temporary because it's limited. It's more perfect. And so if you do go and you look past the veil and you see what the end looks like, then the impermanence is lost. Because you can see, perhaps you come away from this with the understanding that there is more, that you will get more tries at this. And maybe that reduces its value because you've got more.
Well, here's the crazy irony, right? If the theory that God is the soul consciousness divided into multiple consciousnesses in order to have a mirror to experience itself, and then we want eternal life, it's like God is chasing the impermanence of the experience that we have while we are trying to extend that impermanence into permanence.
Well, and I think it's an interesting thing. And like, right now you can use AI and you could take every documented speech and video of Steve Jobs and you can make an approximation of Steve Jobs, and you could have a conversation with Steve Jobs in real time. You can do the same thing with Martin Luther King. You do the same thing with Aristotle.
Wow.
This is like, you can do this right now. It's not them, it's
right.
It's a facsimile. It's an approximation of them based on what we have of them. But
then that begs the question, what is them to begin with?
Right. And by extension, what are we?
Right. That's brilliant. Okay, so you've had this past life regression. You've seen yourself die and be reborn. Does that make you have zero fear of death now?
No. This physical form doesn't want to expire. If I get hurt, if I lose, let's say I get into a car accident and I lose a finger, I'm going to mourn as I might energetically still feel like it's there, but I'm going to mourn its loss. And, I think that, it goes back to psychedelics and some of my experience with that. Whenever you see someone go through an ego death experience, it's one of the most terrifying things that you can go through, to experience what you perceive to be the end of Anthony. No. But that was also the most motivating thing for me. the first time that I went through a past life regression experience, I saw what I perceived to be the tree of life. It was this like Yggdrasil, like something out of like Norse mythology. It was this gargantuan. I hadn't seen Avatar yet, but like something out of Avatar. It was this mountain-sized tree, and as I approached this tree, I had this sense of fear, this overwhelming fear. And the therapist that I was with, she was like, I started crying. She's like, "Why are you crying?" And I'm like, "Well, because I'm scared." Why are you scared? And I'm like, "Well, I don't know." And she's like, well, how would your highest self interpret the tree? And, me being, a Midwestern boy, I was like, and new to this whole spirituality thing at the time. I'm like, my highest self, what is that? I rejected that language. I was like, I considered it. Like, well, my highest self would know that I was part of the tree and the tree was part of me. And she was like, well, why does that scare you? And I was like, because if I'm part of the tree, then it means that I'm nothing. And then in like that moment of like going through that thought, I kind of like in my mind's eye, I like reached out and I touched this tree and I like became one with it. And I lost myself completely, and it was like, well, the idea was, why would that scare you that you were part of it, that you were part of everything? It was like, well, if I'm part of everything, then I'm nothing. And if I'm nothing, that meant that I would have that was the end, and that I'd wasted my time as Anthony. I was like, no. And that's what launched me into this whole thing, was this like fear of impermanence, that I would use the time that I have now to explore this, and I think that's ultimately been the driver of every major mass human achievement in human history, was to have something to contribute to something bigger, to leave some sort of a legacy. And in a way too, I think that we're kind of moving a little bit away from that now. The people are a little bit less concerned. They're more concerned with like connection and like living a full life of service, and it doesn't necessarily matter that like I built that bridge or like I built that rocket or I went to Mars or whatever. I'm not talking about anything specific. But I don't, I think it's important. Everybody's going to have their own answer to that. I find it motivating. And I find the idea that if you could live a life that is motivated by curiosity instead of scarcity, you're effectively living from a place of love instead of fear. And I think that that's a good thing. Maybe it'll lead to less progress. Maybe. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, progress is an interesting concept in of itself, because why is it necessarily a good thing? I mean, like, for example, every time you get an iOS update, it's like, why? Every time, like, the like button moves from this side of the screen to that side of the screen, you're like, why?
I don't know, just to keep us guessing.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's one form of progress, but the pursuit of like life's great questions, or of the creation of art too. It's an exciting time, and because if you can, you will, and there are certain things that we couldn't do that we're now exploring the edges of, and there's a lot, and there's legitimate cause of concern, about what you can do now with some of these tools. And
don't you find it interesting that the progress that we've had in our lifetimes, both as a global community, but also just individually, you and the journey you've been on, me and the journey I've been on, and those journeys bringing you and I together. Don't you think it's interesting that so much of this progress and technology and just means has actually brought us back to discovering things that human beings believed 5,000 years ago?
Yeah, I do find that interesting. And I think one of the reasons for that is that science is now, the observable universe is now starting to validate some of the things that have been said for so long. you know, the chakras being related to like the vagus nerve, you know, like chi. They're now discovering like these energy pockets of like fluids and things in the body that actually represent chi and energy, and you know, thermodynamics and like the transference of energy as consciousness, or the representation of it. You know, like I find it fascinating, and it also makes a lot of sense. And also, there's like so many people out there that are so much smarter than me that talk about forces at work that they can't explain. You know, you start about talking about quantum physics, like things like non-locality.
Well, quantum entanglement is a very interesting concept. Do you know what that is exactly?
I mean, I've heard so many different versions of it. If you care to explain your explanation, I would love to hear it.
Yeah, I mean, I'm no expert, but from my understanding of it is that a particle, if you split it into two, and you put them into different, like you separate them from enormous distance, whatever happens to one particle immediately, not even with any passage of time, happens to the split version of that particle somewhere else.
Right. So that my understanding is that's a concept that's called non-locality. Right. And it's exactly as you said. So if something can exist here, then it can also, and it exists outside of time. Right. Right. Then reincarnation could also exist. The spirit consciousness could also exist outside of time. You know,
for sure. I mean, I've always wondered this, like long before the current discussion of aliens and disclosures and all this sort of stuff, and Greys and Pleiadians and all this. I've always wondered. I saw this movie, in fact, a long time ago, that I had the thought before I saw the movie, but when I saw the movie, I was like, whoa, that is literally what I've been thinking of my whole life. The Others. Have you ever seen that movie?
Oh, it's with
Nicole Kidman.
Yeah, I have seen it a long time ago. I was like, forget at the end of the movie.
Well, I don't remember that, but anyway. But the concept of the movie was a couple move into a house they got a kid, and the house is haunted, and like they have all these issues with like the ghosts in the house, and the big twist at the end of the movie is they're the dead people, and the ghosts are actually like alive people. Right, so it's a question of perception, and the thing I've always wondered is if actually aliens or other life or whatever is just expired humans in different consciousness, like in a different space-time.
I think it's possible, you know, and to bring it back to the past life thing. A lot of times when people go through past life regression, they don't go into the past. Sometimes it's a parallel place. Sometimes another planet. You know, sometimes people start exploring some really wild stuff of like research being done in other worlds and what their life's purpose was in that space. And sometimes I've seen people be animals. You know, one guy was a gorilla protecting his family, and then subsequently became sober and stopped, you know, drinking and like turned his life around.
I fully believe that one. I also believe that consciousness is not like, I don't believe that your soul and my soul, when it gets reincarnated, will be exactly the same as what it was this time in this go round. You know, I know obviously the body's not going to be the same, but I don't even think the soul is exactly the same. I think that, like, the way I look at it is like physics, the law of thermodynamics is like, you know, whatever energy is expended, energy can't be created or destroyed. It just gets transmuted into somewhere else. So, like, for example, let's just say, you know, my life is, you know, 7 units of energy of some kind, and like a cat's life is 1 unit of energy, and, you know, an ant's is like 1/10 of an energy. And let's just say that like the right combination of that dying to make one elephant being all of those could mean that, like, if it happens in that instant that an elephant gets born or fertilized at the same time that these things die, then that energy that conscious energy could pass into that elephant. So then now that elephant could be a combination of me, a bunch of ants, and a cat. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And the reason I think that, and this is kind of a little bit trippy, is because I have experienced, of course I can't say it's fact, it's just feeling, but I have experienced an insane feeling with one of the cats that I had, that I felt it was myself. You know, I felt it was just like a part of me divided into a furry little fun thing. You know?
Yeah. I mean, I can't speak to your relationship with that cat, but I know that I've had my own with my cats and with other animals. Cats are particularly interesting. Like, there's certain moments when you're like, what are you looking at?
Yeah.
Like, what? Like, you're looking at something. What is it? You know?
They're definitely looking at it. They're definitely seeing something we're not seeing.
Yeah. And, yeah, it's nuts.
Though I got a little window into that, actually, because there was a day where, I don't know, I was doing some spring cleaning and whatever it is, and some dust had like come off some pillows, and it was like floating. And just at that moment that the dust had come off from those pillows, I think I was spraying something, so there was some like moisture in the air, and there was also like, just at that moment, like a ray of light of sunshine came through the window, and the combination of all of that stuff created this insane thing that I was looking at that wasn't there. Like, if you like, it was not there in the air, it was like right here, you know? And if I looked there, it was just empty space. And if I looked here, it looked like an apparition of some sort, right? And my cat was just looking at it, like, but he was looking at the whole thing around it where I couldn't see it. And I was thinking to myself, I wonder if my cat is always seeing that, this little thing that I'm seeing in this moment. I wonder if he's seeing that all the time.
Well, I think this is fine to say. There was this one time at the tail end of a music festival when I smoked a little bit of DMT, and it was sunrise, and I was looking out over the water, and it was as if there was these four distinct things, like entities. I'd never seen anything that I perceived to be intelligent before on any kind of psychedelic. And it was as if they were waiting, and they were deliberately presenting themselves to me. They didn't speak. They had shape, but they also had like this weight, like a density to them. I'd never experienced anything like it before. And like, you could argue, of course, that's the drugs, but it was and then they communicated with me, and it was as if they said, don't worry, we're here. We've got you. Keep going. And when they said you, it wasn't like you, Anthony. It was like you, humanity. And that has stuck with me, like, to a point that I don't think it was the DMT. I think the DMT pulled a veil down for a second. And I think that they're still there.
Oh, there is 100% things out there, because I've seen it completely sober, by the way, not with my eyes, but with my car reverse camera. Like, I'm backing out of my driveway and I'm seeing things that my car is showing me that look like spirals of energy just in the air. I look behind me, they're not there. I don't see anything. Look back at my camera, I'm like, how is my car camera picking up something that looks like a ghost? But it's not a humanoid ghost. It looked like what I was seeing was like tunnels of, it looked like a little tornado, but like mini stacks of tornadoes. What am I looking at?
I mean, I can't say, no more, any more than I can say what I saw, but it just leads me to believe, I think there's this theory about aliens and this sort of thing. I really think that, like, once we create our own simulated reality, our own version of the Matrix, I think the likelihood that we're going to encounter, and hopefully I'm proved wrong here, I think the likelihood that we're going to encounter an organic, intelligent life form that's traveled from another solar system, given the vastness of space and how much time it would take for something to do that, is very low.
Really?
But
I don't agree with that.
But I do think that once we create our own version of a simulated reality, if we do create our own version of a universe, in some supercomputer, which probably is not that far off at this point, that if that has already been done, that we will encounter the version that did it before us.
So you don't believe in all the Anunnaki stories and all that, like...
I believe that I think that it would be a terrible, terrible waste of the cosmos if there's not intelligent life out there. I think that it seems more likely to me that if we are able to in fact create a simulated reality that is indistinguishable from our own, that it's already happened, and that we would encounter a predecessor of some sort.
Exactly. Sorry.
Oh, you're good.
Yeah, that's the Elon Musk theory, isn't it?
Well, and at the end of the day, it's like, what do you do with that? You just keep living your life.
Right, exactly. You become a trillionaire.
But like for everybody else, it's like you just keep on. I mean, even Elon Musk is like, he's trying to expand consciousness into the cosmos, because we don't know if there is consciousness beyond Earth. We don't know.
You know what's something, and not to rag on Elon, but I was a little bit shocked about something, honestly. Like, I heard him talking on some podcast or something, and like, it seems that his whole motivation for everything he's done was Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy and this obsession about the number 42, right? And like, to him, like, that meant something so deep that's pushed him to pursue everything he's pursuing, And like I admire it in some way, of that he has drive and he has purpose. But on another hand, I think to myself, but like, why do we need to go to space? Why do we need to do any of this thing? Actually, who Gil Scott-Heron is?
I think, I can't call him to memory.
You've heard this song, "The Revolution Will Not Be Televised," right? Mm-hmm. That's Gil Scott-Heron, which is ironic that like that became music in a Nike ad. But anyway, Gil Scott-Heron, he was kind of one of those people that, some people say he invented hip hop, like before hip hop existed. He was one of those people who took spoken word, mixed it with song, mixed it with soul, mixed it with jazz. And obviously Revolution Will Not Be Televised is an example of that. Well, he had a song called Whitey on the Moon, which I think he did in, I don't know if it was 1969 or whatever. I don't know. He's talking about all these people like Spiro Agnew or something in the song. But the song is a list of things that are real life, serious social problems, particularly happening in the black community, and particularly happening in like impoverished community. And at the end of the line of everything that he says is, "and Whitey's on the moon." Right? I think the first line of the song is something about "my sister can't pay the rent and Whitey's on the moon" or something. Yeah.
So why are we pointing our attention that way?
Right, exactly. Well, the bigger question is not only why you said it yourself earlier, right? That like, you think that the sort of end of AI, well, not end meaning the end of it, but like the conclusion of where this is taking us is into more human experiences. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of like my question is like, well, why do we have the desire to go to space and not the desire to go to Skid Row and end Skid Row and help human beings who are like living on the street?
If you're asking me the answer why, is because there's no money in it. That is the reason, because there's no...
Well, the thing is, I don't think that's the reason for Elon either. I don't think he's super motivated by money. I think he's motivated because he read a book that told him the answer to everything was 42, and which doesn't actually mean anything other than the absurdity of what that meant, which meant that I think he explained what that meant to him, which was that you kind of got to set something and work backwards from it rather than, I don't really fully understand what his motivation was, but like the point is, he something impacted him on a philosophical level that made him think we need to become a multi-planetary species when we can't get Los Angeles together.
Well, there's an optimistic view of this, that with the advent of AI, you're going to see more money changing hands than any other time in human history in such a large quantity. And I think the reality is that the majority of the generation that is working in AI right now is significantly younger than the wealth holders that have been historically, usually it's like legacy wealth, family wealth. But now you're seeing new companies and, 20-somethings inheriting or becoming millionaires on a scale that is unprecedented. And the reality is that the younger generation, if you had a conversation with any of them, or if you just look at statistics, they're fundamentally more concerned with human rights, mental health, green initiatives, and these sorts of things. And so I think what you're going to end up seeing is that there's going to be a philanthropic movement like never before in human history, because these younger, I don't want to call them kids, but 20 years my junior, are going to have more money than they know what to do with, and they're going to want to do something good with it. So I think that you will see people going on Skid Row. You will see people cleaning up the oceans. You will see, you're going to see a lot of philanthropy. People are going to want to find places to put that transfer of wealth. Because at a certain point, you don't need much, beyond, I can't say what somebody needs or what somebody doesn't need, but I think there's a lot of people who believe that they don't need as much as they have. And I think that most of those are younger people.
I love what you're saying, and I like to believe it myself. The question that arises for me is there are people who are power hungry, and let's just say you were a trillionaire, right? Let's say you were in that league, and you were inclined to want to really help the world, right? But then let's say I'm a trillionaire also, right? And I'm inclined to not help the world and hoard my wealth and actually become a double trillionaire, right? As you help the world, your resources are going to go down while mine go up. And your force of benevolence is going to decrease versus my force of egomaniacalness. Have you thought about that? Because I've thought about that.
Yeah. Yes. And I've also been to Burning Man, and I think there's a world where everyone wins. There's this Trump ideal of the art of the deal, I have to take in order for me to get. And I've seen an alternative. And my hope is that is more appealing. I hope.
I hope too. I share that hope.
Yeah, I don't know.
I just sort of go through all the different machinations in my mind of different possibilities, and I do have hope. I feel like, a lot of the things that you said, I really feel is where we're headed. I feel like we're going to hit a wall where technology actually forces us to really be human again, and we're going to really appreciate and value our humanity in a way that we haven't for generations. I'm convinced of that. So I have that hope, but I do feel like it's a rocky road until we get there. And I kind of have a feeling that until we get to that point, being the common thread of humanity, we're going to go through lots of ups and downs where we're trying to figure it out.
I agree. And personally, honestly, the sooner that we can migrate away from screen-based information, I think the more human we're going to become. Because the screen, our phones and our iPads and our TVs and all this stuff, that I think has been the greatest disservice to. I mean, as somebody who creates AI-based visuals for a living,
I was going to say that's so fascinating to me that you say that, because obviously you're thriving in this environment.
Yeah, I mean, I'm thriving, and it's a profound exploration. It's one that I enjoy, and I'm not necessarily talking about creating records of people's past lives or the afterlife, or their subconscious. I'm talking about social media and being made to feel lesser than, and comparing yourself against a fictitious ideal, and being force-fed that on autoplay every time you turn something on.
What? Okay, why do you think this happens now? Because everyone I talk to, including people who don't seem to be the most sort of bothered about social equity or, moral, philosophical problems, everyone says and agrees that the image that they see on social media is just a vacant bullshit projection of something that they know is not real. And yet everyone is still chasing that when they see something, when they see someone post something and they oh my God, this person's doing that, now I have to do that, It's
psychological warfare. There has been so much money and if you think about it, if you actually stop, it's so sad. If you actually stop to think about how many human hours have been spent scrolling, it's crazy.
Yeah.
And even me, I had to delete, the social media apps from my phone because, especially before bed, I open my phone and an hour goes by. I'm like, what just happened? What just happened? I went time traveling. I just woke up an hour later and there's something that's been created and iterated upon so many times that I can't look away, and it's a huge, and on top of that, we're all comparing ourselves to it.
Right.
And it's crazy. And I've seen certain people that the way that they post is not who they are, it's who they want to be. And we're all guilty of that to a certain point. And you create this recursive feedback loop of I am what I post and no one likes it. And then I need to get more people to like it. So I got to post something else that's more of what I think that I want to be. And then I'm going to validate my existence based on this narrative that I'm creating. It's it's personal branding. It's not life, this is real. This is as real as it can be, and it drives me nuts. And I think that we will see in short order. I've seen there's been a movement recently to have a dumb phone. People are going back to your old school flip phones so that you don't have social media, so you don't have this constant need for validation. And I think that you're going to end up seeing a screenless operating system here very shortly that is probably entirely audio based so you can make phone calls, so you can check your emails, so you can get your navigation, so you can do everything that you need to do, but it's not going to involve this trap.
Yeah, I was actually happy in a period of my life when I had a phone that wasn't a smartphone,
mm-hmm.
and I had a laptop or a desktop computer that allowed me to do incredible things. And I was, I had delineated my time that when I'm in my office or in my studio, I'm sitting in front of a computer and I'm doing incredibly powerful things. And I do them from 9 a.m. till 1 p.m. and then I take a 1 hour lunch break and then I continue doing them from 2 p.m. till 7 p.m. and then I stop and that world is over. And then I have a cell phone if someone wants to get hold of me, and even it had SMS capability. Fine, I have some communication with the outside world. But I really like that idea of like, you know, work is work and life is life.
I've been told, and I'm not sure if this is true or not, I hope it is, that like Christopher Nolan doesn't have a cell phone.
Well,
Because if he did-
he can.
Yeah.
You can do that.
Because it like, anybody his justification is like, well, if I did, I wouldn't get any work done.
For sure.
You know, and it is such a, and then at the same time, you know, sending your loved ones memes is like one of the greatest joys on the planet.
It's so fun, isn't it?
I mean, I saw this thing with Tom Hiddleston. He's like, anyone who takes 15 minutes out of their day to send personal memes to their nearest and dearest is a hero.
I love that.
You know? Because I mean, and do I want to give that up? No, but yeah, it's the other stuff, you know. And I think it's all driven by commerce. But
Agreed.
yeah.
Yeah. Well, on that note.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, man. Thank you for coming and having this amazing chat. And I love your vision of how we can come together and build a better world.
I think we will, you know. And it's through doing stuff like this.
Thank you, brother.
Yeah, buddy.
Thank you. So good.
Thanks, brother. That was awesome. That was fun.
Are we one?